Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyanjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakapatubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Hare Krishna, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on something that is my favorite thing to think about, practice, and consider. And I thank Pamanava Swami for inviting me, for encouraging me to speak. And I thank Bhakti Rasa Devi for also encouraging me. And today we'll speak about self-integration and devotion. And I've been working in the field of personal development for the last 10 years. I have been studying under Dear Govinda Prabhu with Savatov, and recently am starting my own practice. Well, I've been working with Savatov as a practice for the last 8 years. So now I'm starting my own practice, and it's been an interesting journey for me, because the reason I got into personal development is because I wanted to be a more wholesome devotee for Krishna. So I wanted my devotion to be wholesome and authentic, and it seemed to make sense to be a wholesome and authentic person, to have authentic, wholesome devotion. So I met devotees in 2000 and in Kansas. And then my husband and I moved to Denver, Colorado, where we are at now, in 2009. So we've been here for about 15 years. And we take care of the local temple here with management. And then we also do quite a bit of pujari service. So I've been dressing Radha Govinda every day. That's one of my sadhanas right now. So I think when we all show up for our sadhana, whether it's japa or reading or puja, we come to it like we're meeting Krishna, right? And in that contrast that I experience between my meeting and coming ready, here I am, Krishna, here I am to worship you, to chant your holy name, to receive words about you, then I experience myself, right? So every day I'm showing up for my japa sadhanam, every day I'm showing up for my puja, my worship, and I experience a consistency with the seva or sadhana, and I experience some changes of me, the differences every day. So in seeing that every day, this is happening, these thoughts are here, these emotions are here, this is my absorption, I'm making some effort to focus. So what I started to notice was I actually need to do something about this, what's going on internally. That showing up is the first step. Focusing, there's a lot more to it. So it's in that moment of touching and relating with Krishna, that moment of meeting, then I see, I can actually become a whole more authentic person and a whole more authentic devotee by looking at what's going on inside. So that's how I started my practice of personal development. And then I became involved with different trainings and practices. So I currently have a second level certification, life coach certification through the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation. So I'm a professional coach, and through Savatov, I'm a professional coach at the second certification level. So we'll start now. I want to talk about first of an overview, and then 5 different stages of self-integration, and then practical tools and practices that I've practiced myself, that I've tried and tested with myself and others, with clients, and I'll share those. So as an overview, there's genuineness. So there's 3 parts of genuineness. So when we have our experience, we're having our human experience, we're present with our self, we're having our experience. We also have an awareness of our experience, and that awareness may or may not be there. And then we have our communication or our expression of our experience. So there's 3 parts of genuineness or authenticity. If one experiences me as genuine, then I could say that those 3 parts are all connected with each other. So experience, awareness, and communication. So when I communicate my awareness, but my awareness is not connected with my experience, then there's some inauthenticity. There's a disconnect. Or when my experience, I'm not fully aware of what's going on, I'm not fully aware of my experience, then there's some disconnection, there's some fragmentation. So we may have different parts of the self. We have our mental body, right? We have our physical body, our mental body, and then we have our essential self, which is pure spirit. And the pure spirit has its emanations of consciousness. So the awareness is the consciousness. So when our mind, with our mind comes the emotions and the senses. So the senses and the emotions are all there. So when we have our consciousness aware, when our awareness is focusing on our experience, then we can start to pull in and collect different parts of the self that are fragmented off. So in psychology, they say that when someone experiences a trauma, then the psyche has a function where it pushes it out of the conscious awareness until there's a point in one's life where the abilities to process that experience are available. So we may, mostly without our awareness, we may be pushing different parts of our experience into our psyche. And what happens is it creates some fragmentation of ourself. So I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had experiences with people, including with devotees, that they don't seem fully there. They don't seem fully present, or there's some parts of themselves that are sort of wounded or broken or shoved back, and they don't feel fully present. So I've experienced that with myself, and I've experienced that with others. So when we are showing up to our puja, or showing up to our japa, or showing up in our sadhana, even in our sangha, not just even, but especially in our sangha, then we're bringing this fragmented self. We're not fully there. So I want to offer my whole full self to Krishna. The Sharanagati, surrender. I want to offer my full self. So I want to collect and pull in all those fragments and process them. And what I found is that I didn't have the skills at first to do that. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know that I could even do that. But I started to see that it's totally possible and it's quite practical. And there are some simple practices that we can do on our own. And then we can also get help from others. So I want to share something that was really cool when I was preparing. I've read things before, but I found something that's super cool. So, yeah. Srila Prabhupada, the other day, I was listening to a class, he was speaking about self-study. And he was saying that if you study a drop of salt, you can understand the quality. If you study that drop of salt, you can understand that the whole ocean is salty. So similarly, when we study ourselves and we see the qualities, then we can understand we can understand further the nature of the Supreme, because we're part and parcel of the Supreme. He also uses the example of the sun, that it's expansive, and when there's sunshine, the sunshine is not different than the sun. And we can understand the sun by looking at the emanations of the sun. And then he also switches it around and says that if we understand God, then we can understand ourselves. So he speaks about self-study, and then later in the class, somebody asks him about psychology. And he says, "Oh, psychiatry?" And they ask, "Well, what do you think about that?" And he says, "Yeah, all of these energies are coming from Krishna." And he says, all of these, it's very subtle. It's subtle energy, but it's Krishna's energy. So self-study, I found, was enhancing my devotion. And I was able to bring the different parts of myself and understand that all of the emotions that are existing within me are natural parts of the self. And I want to show you another thing. I want to tell you another thing I found yesterday. There's a conversation that Prabhupada has with Dr. John Mize. This is in 1975. And Dr. Mize talks about some quote unquote negative qualities or negative expressions. And he talks about anger. And Prabhupada says, oh, so to become angry, that's also a qualification of God, to become angry. And the doctor says, I don't understand what you said. He says, because it's a quality of God. To become angry is a quality of God, because unless there's anger in God, how is there anger in me? But we, as we misuse our independence, we misuse our anger. And God does not misuse his independence. He does not misuse his anger. But the anger quality is there. Otherwise, how have I got anger? This is the Vedanta philosophy. Janmadyasya yataha. Everything is emanating from the Supreme. So if the anger is there, it must be there. Dr. Mai says, and jealousy? Prabhupada says, everything. Dr. Mize, it's difficult to imagine Krishna jealous. Prabhupada, yes. Dr. Mize, what could he possibly be envious or be jealous of? Prabhupada, you say whatever thing, but anger, whatever you have got, God has got in bigger quantity and perfect quantity. That is the conception of God without any imperfection. So then later on, he talks about how everything has its proper use. And in the material condition, we do not know that. And he starts to speak about Hanuman, how Hanuman used his anger to serve Lord Ram. And now we are living beings. We are conscious. We cannot give up anything, but we are being trained how to utilize everything for Krishna. So what I've found and what I've experienced with myself and others is that when in Krishna consciousness, when we're practicing Krishna consciousness, we have a tendency to judge whatever emotions are coming up for us and whatever thoughts we have. And we use the framework of Krishna consciousness to judge those things. And it's often to the detriment of our good health, including our devotional health. So what I found is that when we actually simply witness what's happening, then we can move through and we can actually utilize whatever's happening in service. And it sounds contrary, but this is actually what Prabhupada's saying, is that if this is happening with me, if I'm experiencing pain, sadness, grief, if I'm experiencing joy, happiness, then those qualities must also be in the Supreme. So if that's the case, then why am I pushing it down when I experience jealousy? Oh, I shouldn't feel jealous. When I'm experiencing envy, I shouldn't feel envy. And so what happens is, consciously or without our awareness, what happens is that we judge and shove it down. And then what happens is when we shove it down, then it comes out later, or it starts to fester and turn into other things. So there's studies done that show that when we are not processing our experience, including the emotions like anger, then they can turn to physical disease. So Gabor Mate has a book called When the Body Says No, and he's done extensive research in collaboration with other doctors, showing that this is the case. So particularly when it comes to emotions, which seem to be even more subtle for people than thoughts, they are quite intricate and they have their own wisdom and genius. So recently, I just have been looking through this book, The Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren. It's quite genius, actually. I'll show you. Here's what it looks like. She goes through every single emotion and she describes the wisdom and genius of each emotion and the energy that it provides for us and the insight that it's providing for us in any given situation when we're experiencing that. So that's a general overview, and I want to show you a few other things. So when Arjuna was on the battlefield, when he was driving his chariot, Krishna was driving his chariot through between the two armies at the beginning. In the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, he describes what's happening with his body physically. He's describing what's happened inside him with his emotions. He's experiencing grief, sadness, and then he describes what's happening in his thoughts and his logic. So it's quite interesting to me that here he is sitting with Krishna. Krishna is driving his chariot. He's in between the two armies, and he's describing, I'm sweating, I'm weak, I feel I'm trembling, and I'm experiencing deep grief. And I'm foreseeing that these two armies I have family members here. And I'm just looking forward, what's going to happen because of this, if we do this. And so Krishna is there and he's witnessing Arjuna, and Arjuna is aware of what's happening to himself. So I find it interesting that the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is showing his awareness of his experience, and he's communicating his awareness of his experience. And there he is, and Krishna then says, okay, here I can now instruct you that you are surrendering your whole self and you're integrated, you're fully here. And Prabhupada, I found this really amazing thing. Prabhupada actually says, you cannot fight without senses. You can't fight without anger. That anger has to be there. He actually, I want to find it because it's really funny. He says, senses must be there. Nonsense cannot fight. So he means no senses cannot fight. I don't know where it is right now. So we have to actually utilize the energy of anger in order to set boundaries and to get clear on what's happening. If we're shoving it down, we're not taking advantage of that energy that's coming through. So I'll go more into detail, but I want to talk about the 5 stages of integration. So the first one is acceptance. Acceptance is bringing our awareness into what our experience. No, first we bring that awareness. I'm sorry, not acceptance. Number 1 is awareness. So we're bringing our awareness into our experience. There are some exercises I'll show you that we could do. Simply noticing. We're not judging, we're just looking at what's going on. And some of us, maybe many of us, might find that we actually aren't very capable or aware of what's happening for us internally. Many of us are accustomed to hovering on the intellect or the mental, the mind, and we may be aware of our thoughts and less aware of what's going on in the psyche and the emotional part. So by just being aware and bringing our awareness without judging and simply noticing, then the second step is acceptance. So acceptance is different. We're first bringing our awareness, and secondly, we're accepting the reality of our experience. The reality is, this is my experience. So when we're looking at reality and what's true, our experience is true. Our experience may be different than somebody else's experience. Our experience may be a slice of the entire reality, but our experience is truth. So just at least allow ourselves to experience what's happening and then accept that this is my reality right now. Because without acceptance, we cannot make any progress or change. We can't change anything until we accept it. It's that first little moment when we just accept what's happening. So accepting means I'm not judging it. I'm not bringing in philosophy yet. I'm not doing any of that yet. I'm simply noticing, bringing my awareness, and then I'm accepting, oh, I recognize that I have some jealousy. We'll just use jealousy because jealousy, envy. Oh, I'm experiencing envy. I'm experiencing anger. And then the third stage is understanding. So we look, oh, why am I experiencing this? What's happening? What's happening for me for this energy to come up? Okay, this happened. And then we can gain greater understanding, even by learning a little more about emotions. It's interesting because some people say, oh, women are more emotional than men. But actually there's studies, they've studied empathy in men and women. And they've found that when women are initially more empathic. I'm using air quotes right now. But when men just do some simple training and exercises in empathy, then they're just as empathic as women. And so in my experience with clients and with my husband, who I've been living with for the last 20 years, or have known him for the last 20 years, I can see that whether you're male or female or anything, you're a living entity and you experience emotions. So let me go a little more into this. I was reading Sri Krishna Samhita by Bhakti Thakur, an English translation. And in there, he talks about emotions. Of course, I think there's this assumption that, the emotions we experience, they're material. Yeah, but listen to what he says. So first of all, he makes one statement that without emotions, there's no existence. Okay. And then he says that, let's see. The soul's inherent emotions could continue to remain active with the soul, but in the material world, the mercy of the Lord is the principal force for awakening spiritual emotions and situating one in its constitutional position. With a desire to convert material attachment into spiritual attachment, all the spiritual emotions are mixed with material emotions. For giving up parag gati and practicing pratyag gati. So then he gives examples. He says, when a soul sits in the chariot of the mind and chases the sense objects through the gates of the senses, this is called paragati. When this current again flows towards the soul's own abode, it is called pratyagati. So then he gives different examples. When we're experiencing a desire to eat palatable foods, then we eat prasadam. When we have the desire to see beautiful things, then we see the beautiful form of the Lord. So he's giving these different examples, very practical examples. The pratyek dharma of associating with the opposite sex through marriage for the prosperity of a Vaishnava family was exemplified by Manu, Janaka, Jayadev, and Pipaji. The pratyek dharma of festivals is seen in the festivals celebrating the pastimes of Lord Hari. So he talks about this gradual transformation, that the spiritual emotions are mixed with material. And then we practice again and again, we show up again and again. So when we're looking at the emotions, we're not rejecting, this is, but it's mixed. It's mixed. And mixed means that it's going to have to get cleaned up. And if anger is there, then anger is there, then we utilize that. So I want to share, I know we're still on this understanding part, but this part's really it's really juicy. Okay. So listen to this. There've been studies about quote unquote positive affirmations. So they've studied that people that were forcing positive affirmations, and I say force because we might try to enforce or reinforce ourselves through positive affirmations. But what they've studied is that positive affirmations in the long run actually did more detriment. And I'll just share. She says, this is Carla McLaren, and this: if you try to enforce positive affirmations and try to stay in contentment at all times, then you experience change, or you experience novelty or hazards, your fear and your panic won't be able to help you orient to any of it. If someone challenges you, your anger won't be able to help you reset your boundaries and regain your composure. If something jeopardizes your relationship, your jealousy won't be able to help you identify the problem and solidify your mate retention skills. Or if you desperately need to let go of something, your sadness won't be able to help you. If all you're willing to feel is contentment, you'll lose your way. And that's not a positive outcome. So what they've studied is that when we repress one or two emotions, or these emotions, but not these, what happens is all the emotions are squelched, because the emotional flow, it's actually an aspect of the mental emotional body. There is no positive and negative. So it's a flow, it's an energetic flow of the emanation of the self, the mental body. It's an extension of the self. So when we're pushing one emotion, and then we won't be able to utilize because we can't access that energy. So understanding is the third stage. The fourth stage is then processing and moderating. So when we start to gain understanding about these things, then what we can do is we look at, let's say, anger, and we say, anger is, if we can understand, anger helps us clarify what's important to us, clarifies our values, helps us set boundaries, what's okay, what's not okay, what's important, what's less important. And we get clear. Anger is like fire. Fire is clarifying. Fire clarifies butter into ghee. We get clear. So that energy of anger, we can actually see when anger comes up in a situation, instead of pushing it down, justifying it, saying it's bad, I'm dirty for feeling angry, we actually look at it and say, okay, this is coming up right now. What's important for me? What are the values that are important for me in this situation? What's okay and what's not okay, and why? So then we can process and moderate. So it's like a energetic flow, and we access the intuitive genius of the emotions and that energy to actually utilize what action or not action we'll take in any situation. And we do that with this whole authentic self in devotion. So just like it's described that Kshatriyas have to get angry to fight, otherwise they can't fight. So similarly, we have to experience our human experience in order for us to live fully in a conscious, not just, now we have Krishna conscious, but also just simply conscious life. Then we can bring that fullness in our devotion. So Krishna consciousness is like, hey, Krishna, I'm experiencing this. What am I supposed to learn in this situation? How do I utilize this energy? What's the best course of action? So just like Krishna said to Arjuna, he said, okay, you're mourning, and you're mourning not for the right thing here. Let's moderate this, let's turn this and reorient you and use that energy into fighting. So Krishna reorients Arjuna. So we're moderating what's happening with us and utilizing that energy. And then the fifth stage is integration. So then that energy that would have perhaps otherwise just been pushed into the psyche and not utilized, we're accessing that energy. What happens is that flow actually re-energizes us. And I've noticed with myself and others that when I've started to clean up the different parts and start to recognize, accept, understand, and moderate what's my experience, my emotions, and the thoughts that are being born out of those emotions, then I have more energy. I'm more energized. So it's similar. It's a similar. I want to give an example. Like, we may all have a cell phone, and we may have apps on our cell phone. So there's this. If an app is running in the background, then it's sucking the energy. So it's like having these programs running in the background that we're not aware of. If I have some app running in the background, if you like push it, you have to make sure you clear them all out, or else if you have like 10 different apps running, it's all sucking the energy from the functioning of the phone. So similarly in ourselves, we have this thing that we haven't really dealt with, this a sense of resentment towards this one person in this situation. And we haven't said anything. We haven't really looked at it because we know if we're going to look at it, it's going to bring up more stuff. And if that brings up more stuff, then I might say this or might do this. But actually, we can consciously step in to that part and say, okay, let's look at it. Let's just like do a little work here and start to clean up this little program running in the background. And then this little thing running in the background. So we're restoring our integrity by aligning establishing our values, and then aligning all these little parts of ourself and lining them back up. And that's establishing an integrated whole self that's in integrity. It's whole and aligned to our offering of our whole self to Krishna. It's aligned. This is the self I want to offer. This is the me that I want to offer. This is the perfectly imperfect me that I'm going to offer today to Krishna, that I'm offering every moment to Krishna. I'm doing my work, and this is my offering. And I want to be happy that I want to be content. I want to be happy with my offering. And I know it's imperfect, it's dilapidated, and it's so amazing that every experience I'm having is an opportunity for me to look at, oh, what am I learning here? And how can I evolve as an entity, a living entity, a devotee? How can I evolve my consciousness? And step by step, that the self-study is an adventure, and at every part of the stage of the journey can be invigorating, and we can rejoice in the self in that way. And so those are the 5. 1, I'll just say them again. The first stage is awareness. The second is acceptance. The third is understanding. The fourth is moderating and processing. And the fifth is integrating. So there's 2 practices. There's one general practice that I really like to do, and I've shared it with others, and I'll share it with you. You can do this practice at any time. I like to do it first thing in the morning. So it's basically a check-in, a scan. I say a body scan, but it's all the 3 bodies scan. So the first thing is I'll start with the physical body, and we start with the toes, and I'll just scan and bring my awareness. Bring your awareness to your toes, to your feet. What's happening with bodily sensations? So my ankles are a little sore from the other day. I've got like some butterflies in my stomach. I'm a little stiff on my neck. We just do a quick scan. Then we go to the mental emotional body. We do the body, and then I do the emotions. So I feel nervous. I feel a little resentful about that thing that person said the other day. It's a little bit, it's not that much, but it's a little, and I want to look at that later. So I just note it down. So I just note these things down. I like to write it down in the morning, just like a stream of consciousness. I'm experiencing nervousness. I have some fear around this thing. And then I go to thoughts. There are thoughts coursing through my intellect. I'm thinking about this. These are some thoughts. This is some thoughts. This is some thoughts. And then I just see, are any of these connected? But that's it. It's a quick scan. I do the three level scan, and then I just note it down. So that's a 1 practice. And then the second practice, I'm going to specifically look at emotions, because I've just noticed within the devotional community, and I'll say, especially for men, that there is a tendency to cut off ourselves, our awareness from the emotional body. And I have had experiences with clients, devotees who are so disconnected, accustomed to not having any awareness around those emotions. And at the same time, those emotions are driving so much of their behavior. So this practice is specific to their emotions. And you take the four main emotions and you take one by one. So here's what you do. Let's start with sadness. So you close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and you bring to your mind sadness. You bring to mind things, different times in your life when you experience sadness. And you just allow the energy of sadness to be in you, and to allow yourself to experience sadness. And you may find that different thoughts will come up, different things that have happened in the past, and you may find that different bodily sensations will come up. You may find that there are places in your being, in your body, where sadness is more prominent. And you just allow yourself to experience that energy of sadness. And then you can bring your awareness in a more focused way to different places within your body. And then you just sit with that energy and you appreciate you appreciate sadness. So there's this sort of subtle appreciation. You go to that place and I appreciate this sadness. And you can take some notes. This is where I felt it. This is where I felt it. And then you go to the next emotion, anger. And you bring to mind anger. Where is anger? You think of angering things that have happened? Think of memories. Where do I experience anger inside me, in my body? You can just allow yourself to experience the energy of anger. You can go to that place within yourself. Bring your focused awareness to those different parts that you're experiencing anger, and you appreciate anger. And so then you can do the same with sadness. You can experience the same. You can do the same with joy. You can try it with different emotions. And what I've seen is that some people, actually most people, there are some emotions that they experience quite easily and well, and they're familiar with, and others they won't experience it at all, because they have their psyche, they have unconsciously pushed that emotion out because of different beliefs they had about it, or experiences they've had in the past where it's been labeled as wrong. And so when we start to visit and consciously do this work with our emotional body, then we're bringing it into the light of the consciousness. And we're in that light, we're able to moderate and process and become more aware and access that energy, so that we are tapping in when we need to, and we're becoming keen and aware. We're becoming expert at being able to tap in, access it, and then make a decision, how am I going to use this? So those are two little practices that I've found are helpful. So I'll just go over an overview of what I've talked about, and then I'll see if anybody wants to add something or ask something. So I opened up to talk about how and why is it important to bring all the fragments of the self together and be a wholesome person in devotion, to make it a beautiful offering. I read some quotes by Bhakti Thakur from Sri Krishna Samhita. I read some things that Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has spoken. I brought up the example of Arjuna experiencing his experience in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. And then I went through the 5 stages. And then I offered 2 practices that you can do on your own. So I welcome anyone to add anything or ask anything if you like at this time.
Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
thank you so much. So I was just thinking, I mean, everything you said, it makes so much sense. And also some things I've been thinking about recently uh, and came across this. Actually, I don't have the book, but I've been watching some video clips of Clara McLaren on some emotions. And I thought, wow, this person's amazing. Never thought of like, emotions that way. What I was thinking is that now it seems to me that emotions are so important if we are to relate with Krishna, if we are to connect with Krishna. Like it almost feels like, what is Krishna consciousness without emotions? Um, but I'm just wondering, how come that, like, this awareness wasn't there for like so many years? Like, what's actually different? It seems like, I mean, from hearing or reading, like it seems like devotees just chanted and like focused on doing their service sadhana and they were okay. But now it seems like, oh, this is so important, we like can't skip this. So I'm trying to understand, what is the difference?
Yeah, what's happening now? That's we're coming to this understanding, whereas before it wasn't even a consideration. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I wonder the same. I know that I know Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He in the introduction of Sri Krishna Samhita, he says that he believes that that groups of souls, they evolve in their consciousness. He says that the human society is evolving in their consciousness, and even though Kali Yuga is marching on and it's also deteriorating consciousness, but he says that the overall human body the overall human society is actually evolving in consciousness and coming to a greater understanding. So I think it's natural that we see in any movement where we're going through growth stages and things happen and we see, oh, this is not working. Oh, when we act like this happens. Oh, so we're learning as we go. And I think that I I I agree with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I think there is degradation and there's also an evolution of consciousness, and we're simply becoming more informed and we're evolving. I don't know.
Yeah, I
That's
was thinking more in terms of, was it not necessary for them? Like, was it not necessary for devotees like a few decades ago? Yeah, Um, I mean, were they able to like perfectly become Krishna conscious without this? And like now we need, I mean, in one sense, I also think that everything is like Padmanabha Maharaj says that, Krishna is ever evolving and everything is ever evolving. So maybe in that sense, it would make sense that, yeah, things that were relevant like back then is not so much now, and, you know, it's changing. Yeah.
or maybe some didn't need to focus on it so much because they were already quite integrated.
Yeah. We're becoming more complex.
I think that self-realized souls, Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls them swan-like persons, that it naturally is there, accepting who we are and what's happening, and not condemning ourselves for thoughts that we have or emotions that we're feeling. They're not judging it necessarily. So that necessity to go into those spaces inside the self and do that cleanup work or do that processing work wasn't as necessary because they were already quite accepting and understanding of their experience.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, he says the swan-like personalities, they go into the world and they protect women, and they and they have families, and they work in the field of government, and they interact with their community. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for your presence. Thanks for being here.
I think Maggie has a question. She has her hand raised.
Hi, Krishna Madhumati Devi.
Hare Krishna. I had a thought, but just from this conversation, asking whether devotees were integrated without this knowledge decades ago. No, most were not, and many still aren't. And many of us have had to take our own journeys to figure it out. I mean, for me, I had to step outside the institution and figure out who I am myself, without hearing everything from everybody else. That was lots of times demanded, be like this, do this, this is your service, whether it's your natural inclination or not. So I've talked to many devotees, and we've had to do that, just, and do some self-care by studying these kinds of things, and just our own process, own life processes. So that's one thing. The other thing I was going to say is, when you do the scan, you start with the physical body and then go to the emotional and then spiritual. And quite a few, 27 years ago, I had a child that was killed. And that kind of process had to happen. Like, I realized going through it that I had to start with, first I had to figure out how to survive, like while I was grieving and felt like not living. And sometimes I had to make that choice. Waking up in the morning, like you're saying, scanning, I'd have to say, okay, today, do I want to live or die? And that's pretty basic. And so then, okay, I'm going to live today. And it definitely wasn't easy. And gradually going through that, and then, and this was like years and years and years of work. And I mean, it was not always horrible, but deciding whether to live and thrive, and then also work through my emotions and gradually get more integrated. So we can definitely can scan every day, that some of these scans are going to take a long time. And and now I can see positive ways that I've changed, positive ways that this experience has been for me. And yeah, it's a big deal.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I didn't really want to speak for the devotees that have come before me. So I'm glad that you shared that.
Yes, exactly. And I don't want people to make assumptions of how things might have been, and just shocking for people to have any idea of having emotions. Like it's like push down, and of course we can't connect with Krishna, and lots of times, and then people lots of times give up on the process because they're not connecting, because they're not being fully human. And so like we thought we could, I'm sure the expression spiritual bypass. It's like, okay, we can put all this other stuff down and we're just spirit, soul, and we are, but not without going through that process that we have to go through.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful. And that's what I was thinking, that most of the times we would hear, oh, just chant, it'll be okay. If you chant, you become happy. And also, like, one thing I was becoming aware of is how only the joyful, like, happiness is given so much importance, and like everything else is just waste, So yeah.
Yeah, and then in the Nectar of Devotion, I was looking through the Nectar of Devotion because there's a chapter where the emotions are described, and it's funny because there it's not just positive emotions in there. There's like lamentation and guilt, fatigue, pride, intoxication, madness, apprehension, doubt, forgetfulness, you know? It's not just joy and celebration. And those are being described as that there are all kinds of emotions that are expressed in the interrelationship with Krishna and his devotees. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's everywhere, right? I mean, even in the material world and like in the devotee world, everywhere somehow happiness is highlighted. But yeah, it's very nice to know. Like, I mean, here you're saying like nectar of devotion, it is mentioned all those emotions, and yeah.
Yeah, they say that the opposite of happiness, the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is vitality. Yeah.
I can attest to that. and and having that vitality is such a wonderful thing, without saying I'm blissful and all that, but like, as I put it, thriving.
You can attest to it because you've experienced
Yes.
that. Awesome. Anyone else want to add something? Thank you for being here. I'm really grateful that I could share this, and I'm really grateful for Padmanabha Swami for encouraging me and asking me and inviting me. So I'm honored. Thank you for giving me your attention and your audience, and supporting me and speaking by listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us such full ideas of what emotions are and can be for us.